Hi, class. It's Dr. Palmer here, and we're talking about party organization today. And the major parties of the United States have a decentralized structure, and the different parts and elements work together primarily during national elections, as we're seeing. The parties themselves have been in decline or losing influence since at least the 1960s. Our objectives here today are to understand why the major parties have a decentralized structure. We're going to describe the national party machinery and how parties are organized at the state and local levels. We're going to identify the three components of the parties and examine the future of the major parties. Here's some political vocabulary that you need to know: ward, precinct, and split ticket voting. How strong, how attractive, and how well organized are the Republican and Democratic parties in our community? You can contact the county chairperson or another official in one or both of the major parties. They're usually not very difficult to find. For example, you could just try the telephone directory. The two major parties are often described as though they were highly organized, close-knit, and well-disciplined group. However, neither party is anything of the kind. Rather, both are highly decentralized, fragmented, disjointed, and often beset by factions and internal squabbling. Neither party has a chain of command running from the national through the state to the local level. Each of the state party organizations is only loosely tied to the party's national structure. By the same token, local party organizations are often quite independent of their parent state organizations. These various party units usually cooperate with one another, of course, but that is not always the case. The role of the presidency. The president's party is usually more solidly united and more cohesively organized than the opposing party. The president is automatically the party leader. He asserts that leadership with such tools as his access to the media, his popularity, and his power to make appointments to federal office and to dispense other favors. The other party has no one in even faintly comparable position. Indeed, in the American party system, there is seldom any one person in the opposition party who can truly be called the leader. Rather, a number of personalities, frequently in competition with one another, form a loosely identifiable leadership group in the party out of power. The impact of federalism. Federalism is one major reason for the decentralized nation of the two major political parties. Remember, the basic goal of the major parties is to gain control of the government. They try to do this by winning elective offices. Today, there are more than 500,000 elective offices in the United States. In the American federal system, these offices are widely distributed at the national, the state, and the local levels. In short, because the governmental system is decentralized, giving many powers to states and localities, so too are the major parties that serve it. The role in the nominating process. The nominating process is also a major cause of party decentralization. Recall that the nominating process has a central role in the life of political parties. You will consider the selection of candidates at some length in Chapter 7, but for now, look at two related aspects of that process. First, candidate selection is an intra-party process. That is, nominations are made within the party. Second, the nominating process can be, and often is, a divisive one. Where there is a fight over a nomination, that contest pits members of the same party against one another. Republicans fight Republicans, Democrats battle Democrats. In short, the prime function of the major parties, the making of nominations, is also a prime cause of their highly fragmented nature. National party machinery. The structure of both major parties at the national level has four basic elements. These elements are the National Convention, the National Committee, the National Chairperson, and the Congressional Campaign Committees. The National Convention. The National Convention is often described as the party's national voice. The convention meets in the summer of every presidential election year to nominate the party's presidential and vice presidential candidates. It also performs some other functions, including the adoption of the party's rules and the writing of its platform. Beyond that, the convention has little authority. It has no control over the selection of the party's candidates for other offices, nor over the policy stands those nominees take. you'll take a closer look at both parties' national conventions in Chapter 13. The National Committee. Between conventions, the party's affairs are handled, at least in theory, by the National Committee and by the national chairperson. For years, each party's national committee was composed of a committeeman and a committeewoman from each state and several of the territories. They were chosen by the state's party organization. However, in recent years, both parties have expanded the committee's membership. Today, the Republican National Committee also seats several of the party's chairpersons in each state, the District of Columbia, Guam, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. Representatives of such GOP-related groups as the National Federation of Republican Women also serve on the RNC. The Democratic National Committee is an even larger body. In addition to the committeeman and woman from each state, it now includes the party's chairperson and vice chairperson from every state and several territories. It also includes additional members from the party's organizations of the larger states, and up to 75 at-large members chosen by the DNC itself. Several members of Congress, as well as governors, mayors, and the Young Democrats, also have seats. On paper, the National Committee appears to be a powerful organization, loaded with many of the party's leading figures. In fact, it does not have a great deal of clout. Most of its work centers on staging the party's national convention every 4 years. The National Chairperson. In each party, the national chairperson is the leader of the National Committee. In form, he or she is chosen to a 4-year term by the National Committee at a meeting held right after the National Convention. In fact, the choice is made by the just nominated presidential candidate and is then ratified by the National Committee. Only 2 women have ever held that top party post. Jean Westwood of Utah chaired the DNC for her party's 1972 convention until early 1973. And Mary Louise Smith of Iowa headed the RNC from 1974 until early 1977. Each lost her post soon after her party lost a presidential election. Ron Brown, the Democrats' national chairman from 1989 to 1993, is the only African American ever to have held the office of national chairperson in either major party. The national chairperson directs the work of the party's headquarters and its small staff in Washington. In presidential election years, the committee's attention is focused on the national convention and then the campaign. In between presidential elections, the chairperson and the committee work to strengthen the party and its fortunes. They do so by promoting party unity, raising money, recruiting new voters, and otherwise preparing for the next presidential session. The Congressional Campaign Committees. Each party also has a campaign committee in each House of Congress. These committees work to re-elect incumbents and to make sure that seats given up by retiring party members remain in the party. The committees also take a hand in selected campaigns to unseat incumbents in the other party, at least in those House or Senate races where the chances for success seem to justify such efforts. In both parties and in both houses, the members of these campaign committees are chosen by their colleagues. They serve 2 years. That is the term for Congress. State and local party machinery. National party organization is largely the product of custom and the rules adopted by the national conventions. At the state and local levels, however, party structure is largely set by state law. The state organization. At the state level, party machinery is built around a state central committee, headed by a state chairperson. The chairperson may be an important political figure in his or her own right. More often than not, however, the chairperson fronts for the governor, a U.S. senator, or some other powerful leader or group in the politics of the state. Together, the chairperson and the central committee work to further the party's interests in the state. Most of the time, they attempt to do this by building an effective organization and party unity, finding candidates and campaign funds, and so on. Remember, however, both major parties are highly decentralized, fragmented, and sometimes torn by struggles for power. This can complicate the chairperson and the committee's job. Local party structures vary so widely that they nearly defy even a brief description. Generally, they follow the electoral map of the state, with a party unit for each district in which elective offices are to be filled. Congressional and legislative districts, counties, cities and towns, wards, and precincts. A ward is a unit into which cities are often divided for the election of city council members. A precinct is the smallest unit of election administration. The voters in each precinct report to one polling place. In most larger cities, a party's organization is further broken down by residential blocks and sometimes even by apartment buildings. In some places, local party organizations are active year-round, but most often they are inactive except for those few hectic months before an election. The three components of the party. There's another way to look at the structure of the two major parties, the roles of their members. From this perspective, the parties are made up of three basic and closely interrelated components. Number one, the party organization. These are the leaders, the activists, and the hangers-on who control and run the party machinery. Two, the party in the electorate. This consists of the party's loyalists who vote the straight party ticket or usually vote for its candidates. And three, the party in government. These are the party office holders at all levels of government. The future of the major parties. Political parties have never been very popular in this country. Rather, over time, most Americans have had very mixed feelings about them. Most of us have accepted parties as necessary institutions, but at the same time, people feel that they should be closely watched and controlled. To many, political parties have seemed little better than necessary evils. Political parties have been in a period of decline since the late 1960s. Their decline has led some analysts to conclude that the parties are not only in serious trouble, but that the party system itself may be on the point of collapse. The present weakened state of the parties can be traced to several factors. They include, number one, a sharp drop in the number of voters willing to identify themselves as Republicans or Democrats, and a growing number who regard themselves as independents. As you see the chart here, so far, or at least in mid-2009, Republican Party identification was at its lowest in 30 years. The second factor that traces the weakness of the parties is a big increase in split ticket voting, or voting for candidates of different parties for different offices at the same election. 3. Various structural changes and reforms that have made the parties more open, but have also led to greater internal conflict and disorganization. These changes range from the introduction of the direct primary in the early 1900s to recent and far-reaching changes in campaign finance laws. 4. Changes in the technology of campaigning, especially the heavy use of television and of the internet, professional campaign managers, and direct mail advertising. These changes have made candidates much less dependent on party organizations, since in many cases they can now speak directly to the electorate. And 5. The growth in both numbers and impact of single-issue organizations in our politics. These groups support, or more often oppose, candidates on the basis of the group's own closely defined views in some specific area of public policy. For example, the environment, gun control, or abortion, rather than on the candidate's stand on the full range of public policy questions. You will look at these and several other matters affecting the condition of the parties over the next 4 chapters. As you do so, remember these points. Political parties are indispensable to democratic government, and so then to American government. Our two major parties have existed far longer than has any other party anywhere in the world, and as you have seen, they perform a number of quite necessary functions. In short, the reports of their passing may not only be premature, they might in fact be quite far-fetched.